I thought I'd show you on one just to show you how easy it is. I use these little wooden skewers. I think these are a little less than a foot long. It's a lot longer than what you need. When you first think about it, you think you just go ahead and stick it through and then stick another one through, but if you do that, one will be higher than the other and it'll end up rocking. So in order to keep it level, keep all the wooden skewer parts on the same plane, I just cut these in two first. I just use a pair of dikes. Just ended up with one on the floor, so be careful where they fly. That's the thing about cutting things with dikes. You really want to wear safety glasses just to be on the safe side. And one of the halves will have the sharp point. I just stick that about halfway in and make sure you don't have your finger on the other side, because you can stick yourself if it goes all the way through. Like I said, I just stick it about halfway in. Then I take the other part that doesn't have the pointy side and I put that right in that hole I just made. That's one. Then I just go directly opposite from that, as close as I can get it, and I stick that one about halfway. And these will be sticking out a lot farther than you need them, so I showed you how you can cut it with dikes, but something like needle nose pliers, they'll have a little place where you can cut wire with them. They work real well too, maybe even a little better than the dikes. And if you just have a pair of old pliers, those will also work. Then you have two of your four parts. You can actually, instead of using four like I do, you can space them out and use just three in thirds rather than fourths. But I'm just partial to the four pieces, so I'll just do this one like the other one. I just stick it in about halfway. I'll go ahead and cut this one in half. I'll use my pliers for that, this one. Just make sure you don't cut yourself or poke yourself while you're doing this. Then I'll take that part like that. Still a little long, so I'm going to cut some off of that. And I'll take that part with the pointy end and put that in my last spot. Now I have four. They don't have to be perfect, by the way, just so you have some support for it when it is over the jar. Then I just have a container with water. I'm using a canning jar. You can use any container with water in it. And you can see it has plenty of excess sticking out, so I'm going to cut some of that off. You just want it to where you can push the potato to one side without it falling in, so that's enough right there. I can probably trim off a little bit more there. That's probably about right that way. Maybe just a little more. And that's all there is to it. The reason one of these is shorter is because that part kind of curls down, pushing it one way. Doesn't really ever go this far. So that will work. That's all there is to it. Now we'll put it under the light with the rest of them, and in time it'll start to show little sprouts here, and those will grow into vines, and we'll be able to make us some Nice slips. Here they are under the lights. The one we just did is the upper left one, and then we have 3 more that are in various stages of development. So you can see what they look like as they progress. The one with the most leaves is a purple molokai, and as you can see, it's off to a pretty good start. Then opposite corner from that one is a red garnet. I have a couple of small ones stuck in there. And as you can see, the roots are just starting to form and they have little sprouts. Then I have an Okinawan purple that's just starting to sprout. And it's also just starting to show roots. In the opposite corner from that one is the one that we just did. And we'll come back in a couple of weeks and see how that one's doing. Here we are a couple of weeks later, and that red garnet that just had a few sprouts and roots just barely starting to form has changed a lot. It's getting quite a few roots, and the sprouts have grown into some nice sized vines. Right next to that one is the one that I used in the tutorial, and if you look closely, it's starting to form little roots and also a couple of little buds at the top. The Okinawan purple that just had tiny little buds at the top a couple of weeks ago has got some nice sized leaves now and is starting to grow. The Molokai purple has also grown some. Now we'll give it a little bit more time and come back again and check. It's 13 days later and they've grown quite a bit, so it's time to cut off a few slips. I don't usually cut it all the way back. I leave an inch or two and it'll start growing a new slip where the old one was cut off. Then once I have it cut off, I trim off all the lower leaves that are going to be down in the water. One thing I should mention while I'm thinking about it, I change the water on these about once a week. These are going in some more jars, so I just trim off the leaves where it's going to be submerged. If you're working with more than one type of sweet potato, it's a good idea to label the jars so you know for sure what they are later. Some of the slips look a lot alike. Then I put the slips in the labeled jar, and before you know it, these will start to grow roots too. Here we are 3 weeks later, and I've added some more slips to these jars, and the roots are really growing nicely. From this point on, it's just a matter of cutting off the slips, putting them in jars, and letting them root. Once they have some nice roots, if the weather permits, they're ready to plant. I've found that if they're in the jars more than a month and a half or so, they'll start to yellow a little bit. So at that point, if it's too early to plant still, I like to stick them in some soil. I'm planting these slips into this small container with some soil in it, just until it's time to put them out in the garden. How I'm planting them in this container is pretty much how I plant them out in the garden. I just try to get all the roots down into the soil and then pack the soil in around the stem. That's about all there is to it. Last year we grew some of our sweet potatoes in straw bales. And if you're wondering how they did, I'll just give you a look. The slips from those little red garnet sweet potatoes ended up in this straw bale, and as you can see, they did very well. In this straw bale, we had 4 different types, and some of them were pretty big. If you want to see full videos of those harvests, I'll put links down below. If you're just now finding this channel and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. We'll see you next time.